city. It is still a small town-like feel where you are very safe, where people are very friendly, and it's very easy to get around and enjoy the local food and the local culture. At the university, we have over 10,000 full-time students at the moment. 1,000 of these are international students, like yourself, coming from 40 different countries, including China. So by studying with us here at UNISZA, you will be amongst people from all over the world, and you'll also get to enjoy the culture, the friendliness of Malaysian people, and at the same time, get a world-class education. So I hope you think about studying in Malaysia. We'd love to have you come and study with us here at UNISZA. And if you are interested in studying here, you can get in touch with any of our agents that will assist you with your applications, or you can contact us directly. If you would like to apply for an undergraduate degree, you can visit the International Center website, find our application online there, download the application, fill in the forms, and send it back to us. And if you would like to apply for a postgraduate program, you can visit the postgraduate website of the university, where you can upload all your documents and your application is processed online. We have different requirements for all the programs at the university. So it is too difficult to explain to you what would be the entry requirement for each individual program, but you can look them up on our brochures on the website or contact our agents. But we do have an English language policy. And at the moment, any applicant, either for undergraduate or postgraduate studies, needs to have TOEFL, IELTS, or the Malaysian English University test. However, for 2021, we hope to have inside UNISZA our own English intensive language program for potential students like you coming from China, where you can receive a conditional offer letter to your faculty, but study English with us first. We hope to have that running in the very near future. So I hope I've been able to provide you with a little bit of information about our university. If you have any further questions, you can contact us by email by going to our website, the International Center at UNISZA. And we do hope that you will choose Malaysia, and I hope that you'll choose UNISZA. You won't regret studying with us. It will be a rewarding time for you, where you'll gain a lot of knowledge, a lot of value. And when you go back home, you will have grown so much after spending several years with us. So I hope that information is helpful for you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to invite everyone here to be ready as our event will begin shortly. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wa mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, everyone. As your MC for today, I, Nabila Ismail, would like to welcome all of you, the invited guests and participants for the second day of the International Conference for Fundamental Studies 2021 or ICFS'21. We will start the day with two keynote speakers, then continue with the paper presentations in session C and D. And lastly, the closing ceremony. Please stay tuned until the end of today to know who is going to bag the Best Presenter Award. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, it would be a proper way to begin our ceremony with a prayer recital. I'd like to invite Al-Fadhil Ustaz Muhammad Hafizuddin bin Abdul Ghani to recite the prayer. Please welcome Ustaz.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Al-Fatihah. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Arrahmanir rahim. Maliki yaumiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. الحمد لله الذي أوضح لنا سبيل الهدى والرشاد وجعل في اتباعه السلامة من الآفات والمهلكات والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المبعوث إلينا خير خليفة الله في الأرض وأحسن أسوة لنا نقتدي به وعلى آله الطاهرين وأصحابه المجاهدين المخلصين ومن اهتدى بهديهم إلى يوم الدين. Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, pada saat yang penuh berkat ini, kami merafakkan setinggi kesyukuran atas limpah rahmat-Mu yang tidak terhingga kepada kami, sehingga dapat kami mengadakan persidangan ini, International Conference on Fundamental Studies, ICFS 2021. Anugerahkanlah kepada kami taufik dan hidayah-Mu, agar persidangan ini berjalan lancar, beroleh kejayaan dan keberkatan. Allahumma ja'alna syakura wa ja'alna sabura wa ja'alna fi a'yunina saghira wa fi a'yunin nasi kabira. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, tanamkanlah sifat-sifat kepujian dalam diri kami, agar amanah ilmu dapat kami galas dengan penuh perhatian, agar kami dapat sentiasa berusaha melakukan penambahbaikan dalam segala gerak kerja dan tindakan, agar kami sentiasa merasa kerdil di hadapan-Mu ya Tuhan, walau dipandang tinggi oleh sekalian insan. Allahumma ya alimu ya hakim. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, moga-moga dengan berlangsungnya persidangan ini akan menambahkan lagi kepada kami ilmu pengetahuan, serta membina sinergi untuk beramal dan menyebarkan ilmu demi faedah insan. Kurniakanlah kepada hati-hati kami istiqamah untuk berada atas jalan kebenaran. Tunjukilah kami dengan cahaya hidayah-Mu yang jelas terang. Perkukuhkanlah iman kami saat ujian dan dugaan datang menjelang. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuman mubaraka wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma wa la taj'alillahumma fina wa la ma'ana syaqiyan wa la mahruman wa la matruda. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, eratkanlah jalinan mahabbah antara kami, khususnya antara Universitas Sultan Zainal Abidin dengan Universitas Muhammadiyah Jakarta menerusi ICFS 2021 yang dianjurkan. Selamatkanlah kami dari segala keburukan, jauhkanlah kami dari segala bala, wabak maupun penyakit yang menyulitkan. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaitana wa hab lana min ladunka rahmah innaka antal wahhab. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين آمين يا رب العالمين.
Thank you, Ustaz Muhammad Fizuddin, for the beautiful prayers. May the peace and blessing of Allah be ever upon us. Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to invite our first keynote speaker for today, the respectable Dr. Hajah Halimatul Radiah binti Datuk Seri Setia Haji Matusin. A brief introduction of our speaker. Dr. Hajah Halimatul Radiah binti Datuk Seri Setia Haji Matusin is the head of At-Tamayuz Unit and Outbound Coordinator at the Center for Promotion of Knowledge and Language, Sultan Sharif Ali Islamic University, UNISSA, Brunei Darussalam. She has obtained her doctorate in education from the Sultan Hassan Al Bolkiah Institute of Education, University Brunei Darussalam. She has received her master's in science in the social sciences, in sociology and social research from the School of Social Sciences, University of Southampton, UK. She is a focal person for UNISSA, the Special Education Unit, Ministry of Education for Special Education Policy Guidelines, 2nd edition. Her specializations and areas of interest include educational psychology, gender, educational intervention, and Industrial Revolution 4.0. Please welcome Dr. Hajah Halimatul Radiah.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much for the very warm welcome speech. My name is, you can just call me Dr. Radiah. I'm actually replacing Dr. Haji Hambali today because he was not able to come this morning due to a meeting. I'm just replacing him, and I'm gonna present a topic on direction and development of fundamental studies in the higher education system in Brunei Darussalam. Can you please, are you able to see my screen right now?
Yes, Doctor. You can
just double control. Oh, Alhamdulillah. Okay. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this this presentation for today as a keynote speaker. It really means a lot to me. So for today, we start on this one, directions and development of fundamental studies in the higher education system in Brunei Darussalam. So here is the outline for the presentation today. We start with the introduction, then slowly we move on to the different educational policies that we have so far. So it is, I'm going to start with the historical background and slowly move on to the current educational system right now, which is the SPN'21, yeah. And then I'll introduce you to the higher education in Brunei Darussalam, the different institutions that we have here in Brunei Darussalam, and then we move on to the fundamental studies in higher education. Okay, so as per introduction, today, as you know, today in Brunei, that students have a choice of 4 universities to choose from, you know, so and all, which is all of these 4 institutions are fully funded by the government. It is providing education has not always been easy as it is now. We look into the early development of the education in Brunei. So the first earliest formal education in Brunei Darussalam, it starts with the Islamic education, and this started to spread traditionally through missionaries and religious figures consisting of local imams and those who had extensive knowledge of the religion of Islam. So this is in line with the advance of the Islam, yeah, in Brunei. So therefore, the rule of the Malay Sultanate of Brunei has played a vital role in this matter. Just for information, that was the informal education. Then years later on, we have the formal education, and it comprises of the compulsory, post-secondary, and higher education. And the compulsory education may be of two types: the general education, which takes 12 years and consisted of preschool, primary, and secondary, and Islamic religious primary school, which also lasted for 7 years, and it is compulsory for Muslim students in Brunei. So basically, the general education is attained in the government or private schools, whereas the religious education is attained in government religious schools. So next slide, we move on to the educational developments during the resident system. So when the British resident first began his duty in Brunei in 1906, the education system in Brunei was along in line of the religious education with sekolah pondok, and students being taught the rudiments of the Islamic religion as well as how to read Al-Quran. So it was not until sometime in 1911 that the British resident was able to introduce a Western education system. So it was not because education did not play an important role for the government, but it was because of the lack of funds as well as the lack of available Bruneians who can teach. So basically, we at that time, there were lacking of teachers, So between 1906 to 1910, the budgets were deficit, and it was only in 1911 that the budget showed a small surplus. So it was also thought that the introduction of a Western-style education, so at that time, it was so soon after the British residency, would be quite sensitive to Brunei population then. So in 1914, so the formal education began with the opening of a Malay vernacular school in Brunei town. So when it started, it had no special building. So the school used a mosque. So psychologically, using the mosque also reduced the resistance and objection from parents. So it later moved to a building which was formerly occupied by the Monopoly Office. So the first group of students was made of 30 boys. So by 1915, the number has increased to 40 boys. Another school was established in Muara with Malay teacher teaching at his own house. Then the other districts got their first schools in the next 3 years. So in Belayit, the first Malay school, the third of the country, that was built in 1917. And in Tutong, it was built in 1918. And then the first crop of these schools was absorbed into the government as trainees in 1917 and full-time government servants by 1920. Some of these students were also sent to attend short teaching courses at a teachers training college in Malacca in Malaysia. And so the education in these early vernacular school was quite limited. So it was conducted in Malay for boys age 7 to 14, and the curriculum including reading and writing in both Arabic and Romanized script, composition, arithmetic, geography, history, hygiene, drawing, and PE, as in physical education. Gardening and basketry were later introduced at some of these schools. So in 1916, the Chinese community established their own school. So the school only used Mandarin as their language of, their language medium. So in 1912, the teachers training in Brunei began. So the shortage of experienced and qualified Brunei teachers was immediately apparent. So according to the State of Brunei Annual Report of 1919, as early as 1918, 2 Brunei teachers were sent for a short teacher training course at the Malacca Teachers College. So the teacher training began in earnest from the 1930s. As there were no teacher training institute in Brunei, all the trainee teachers were sent abroad. So the colleges included the college included the Sultan Idris Teachers College at Tanjung Malim in Perak and Durian Daun Women Teachers College in Malacca. So these were the first Bruneians to sent to Sultan Idris Teachers College at Tanjung Malim in Perak. Yeah. The first Bruneians were sent there is actually Marsal Maun, who later became the Dato Paduka, and Haji Basir Taha, who later also became the Dato Paduka in 1930. They both graduated from the college in 1932. So that was a brief, just to explain to you guys the brief background on the educational background, the educational development during the resident system. So now we move on to 1930s. So in 1930s, we are talking about the Islamic religious education. Yeah. So it was taught formally as a subject at Jalan Pemancar Malay School. It was still limited as classes were only held on Friday after the noon prayers. So the teaching staff was made of most officials. So these teachers received an allowance of $5 per month only. They were not paid by the government, but by three donors. The names were included. So in 1936, Marsal Maun was appointed as the first superintendent of Malay education. So under his watch, the Islamic religious education was moved into the regular Malay education curriculum and no longer taught on Friday afternoon. So however, despite the government's efforts, many parents did not want to send their children to school, even though there were shortages of teachers and shortages of teachers and shortages of school buildings. Yeah, and there were also shortages of willing parents. So most of the boys who attended were from the upper class and very few from villages, village commoners. So most parents refused to send their daughters to school. So in order to encourage parents to send their children to school, the government enacted a legislation to make the attendance at school compulsory. And then the school attendance enactment of 1929 allowed the government to impose a fine between 50 cents to $1 to parents. And this, of course, back then it is a huge amount of money. Yeah. So the fine, 50 cents to $1 to parents who refused to send their children aged between 7 to 14 to government schools. So these enactments covered mostly parents living in the Brunei town area and had little effect elsewhere in Brunei. So at first, during that time, the government's efforts were mostly focused on getting Bruneians to be able to read and write. During those years, there were not many literate Bruneians. The curriculum was based on those taught at Malay schools in the Federated Malay States in Malaya. So they were taught Malay language and Malay culture so that they can inherit their parents' occupation, which were mostly farmers and fishermen. So back then, the oil has not yet to be discovered. Then the British resident was quite pessimistic about the ability of a good education system. So the British resident E.E.F. Pretty in the Brunei Annual Report of 1923, he stated that Brunei, I quote, is not ready for an elaborate educational scheme since there are practically no opening for a well-educated Brunei in his native land and he is lost to leave it. So in that year, despite the opening of a new school in Vilayet, attendance has fallen, yeah, from 193 to 172. So this poor attendance was attributed to the revival of the rubber industry. So the children were taken by their parents to assist in tapping and reading of their small holdings. So English education did not actually begin until expatriate workers came to Brunei with the advent of oil discovery. So in 1931, the Anglicans opened up a school in Kuala Belait. So another English school was opened in Brunei town in the same year, funded by the Brunei Shell and Brunei government, but it was run by a missionary. So a few more English schools were opened by Christian missionaries in the following year. So at that time, His Royal Highness Sultan Ahmad Tajuddin funded a religious Arabic school, and this was in early 1940s. It was a private school registered at the Education Department. So prior to the outbreak of the war in the region, in 1941, the number of schools in Brunei had exceeded 30, including 24 vernacular Malay, 3 private English, and 5 private Chinese. So the number of pupils enrolled was 1,746, including 312 girls. So it was actually during the post-World War, the Second World War, era that the Brunei's education system really expanded into what it is today. Okay, we move on to the educational policy in 1954. So this is actually the system that was first established following the rule of Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Saidul Khairuddin upon implementing the first 5-year development plan in 1953 to 1958. So although the educational policy before the 1954 was never formally and clearly issued by the government, however, it could still be traced through its implementation at that time. So in other words, there was actually already an educational policy, but the government and the administration of the British residents did not want to state it officially at that time. So this matter does not need to be discussed as the resident administration has an hidden agenda. So they do not want the weakness in Brunei's education system, especially Malay schools, to be exposed and cause protests among the Bruneian community, especially among the educated. But the essence of the policy here, as we look into this slide, there are 4. First one is they may choose to study either in Malay or English or vocational school. So in Malay schools, they may continue their studies up to standard 6, and then pupils who wish to enter government English schools are required to sit a special examination to qualify for entry to the school. So when they successfully enter the government school, government English schools, they would study up to Form 3. Then the higher achievers in this education system would have the opportunity to further their studies to higher institutions abroad. So technical and vocational education will be registered to study at the Carpentry School of Shell Oil Company in Syria. So based on that educational policy in 1954, we have another report done by Paul Baki and Paul Chang. This report also put forward the view that the Brunei's education system is geared toward producing highly educated and skilled Brunei manpower needed in various fields, such as administration, trade, industry, and so on. So this is recommended because they find the existing education system stressful and drifting with no clear purpose. So it does not appear to produce a young generation. It does not appear to produce a young generation of Brunei who will have expertise in various fields. But while this is needed by every developing country such as Brunei. So this report of Aminuddin Baki, Paul Chang in 1959, is actually these 2 people are actually were invited by the Brunei government, and they were asked to do the implementation of Brunei's education system. So the result of this study is called Report of Aminuddin Baki. So one of the recommendations is that children of all races to be united under one national education system by using Malay as the Malay medium language. So this system is expected to be a form of unity for all levels of the people, consisting of various races, ethnicities, and religion. So these concepts were recommended because the researchers found that the Brunei education system at that time were implemented various language mediums. Then we have the National Education Policy in 1962. So this is arguably the first education policy for Brunei with the clearest content and goals compared to the 1954 education policy. So although this 1962 national education policy was formulated, some of its content failed to materialize in Brunei's education system. This is actually done based on the report, Aminuddin Baki and Paul Chang report, and it is evaluated and discussed. So they finally successfully issued this education policy known as the National Education Policy, and the primary objective was to utilize the Malay language as the main medium in schools in Brunei Darussalam. The other objective was to unite various educational streams and curriculum in the whole country. However, it was deemed to be failed, because of the 1962 revolution, which was triggered by the Parti Rakyat Brunei on 8 December 1962. So when the uprising took place, the chaos was inevitable. So the majority of schools were used by the military as headquarters and detention centers for captured rebel members. So the implications is that the education operations in Brunei were stunned. They were stunted. And meanwhile, the government's administrative machinery needs to focus on restoring peace. So therefore, the implementation of the National Education Policy 1962 failed, especially to make Malay the medium of instruction. So later on, we have the 10 years later, we have the National Education Policy 1972. This 1972, after the failure of the education policy of 1962, the Brunei formed a new education commission in May 1970. So at the time, Brunei was under the rule of His Majesty Sultan Haji Hassan al-Bolkiah, who ascended the throne in 1967. So that was like 3 years after he became the Sultan of Brunei. So in 1972, it highlights the Islamic education as an important subject to be taught in schools. So this may also have something because this may also have something to do with what was happening in Malaysia at that time. Because at that time, the rise of Islam as the main way of life of Muslim was being actively fought by some Muslims in the country. That was in 1970. So following the failure of the 1972 education policy, the government needs to create a new education policy in line with the development and socio-economic changes of Brunei society, especially when Brunei has achieved full independence from British hands in 1984. So in April 9, 1984, the Brunei government officially declared a new education policy known as the Bilingual Concept Education Policy, or Bilingual Policy. So this is an updated policy which emphasized the use of English language as the main medium language in the Brunei education system. So with its implementation, all government schools followed a single system with a common national curriculum from preschool until pre-university. So this was later extended to private schools except the international schools in 1992. So basically in Policy Multi-Language 1984, the focus is that the English language became the main medium. So in this policy, students from kindergarten to 3rd grade, all subjects would be taught in Malay with the exception of the English. So while starting from 4th grade, the students will start taking all their lessons in English except the subjects Islamic studies, painting and PE, the physical education. So the mastery of English was very much emphasized in this policy due to the government's desire for the local community of this country to master a widely recognized international language as well as integrate more smoothly into the administration of Brunei's oil and gas industry. After the 1984, after roughly around 20 years, then we have the national education system for the 21st century, which in short we call it as the N21. So this is officially officialized by the order of His Majesty Sultan Haji Hassan al-Bolkiah, on the 23rd February 2003. In his dicta, he said, national education must provide dynamic and forward-looking programs in providing useful knowledge and skills to industry and other services without neglecting important values. So the Ministry of Education has produced a report. The Ministry of Education of Brunei is committed to providing an educational system to prepare our young generation for future roles as capable, creative thinking, and innovative citizens who would uphold the social values inherent in the national philosophy embedded in the Malay Islamic monarchy or Melayu Islam Berajak. We usually call it for MIB, yeah. And this is the philosophy that is to be addressed in every level of the education. So the MOE has produced a report on a general study. How does this come about in SPN'21 is that the MOE produced a general report on the general study of the education and development of the country in retrospect of the past 20 years. So it is certain that there are some milestones of success as well as shortcomings in the present system of the education. So in an effort to address those issues and concerns, the Ministry of Education, they laid out a brand over new plan for the next 20 years, and this is the SPN'21. So this SPN'21 is formulated a strategy map that encompasses all of the efforts to advance its educational reform to new levels by focusing on 3 strategic themes. So we have the professional, accountable, and efficient organization. And then secondly, the quality education. And the third one would be the teaching and learning excellence. So subsequently, the Ministry of Education has introduced necessary and drastic changes to the education system through a newly proposed system known as the National Education System for 21st Century, or SPN'21. So the MOE considers this SPN'21 as the platform to realize many objectives of the Wawasan 2035, the national vision. So if you look into the slides here, the highlight this Wawasan Brunei 2035, it actually recognized the accomplishments of its well-educated and highly skilled people as measured by the highest international standards, a quality of life that is among the top 10 nations in the world, and lastly would be a dynamic, sustainable economy based income per capita within the top 10 countries in the world. So that is the points inside the the Wawasan 2035. Yeah. All right. So the SPN curriculum and assessment framework before school sets out to meet the MOE strategic plan. Yeah. For your information, it is an initiative for the equality education. So it includes critical skills in mathematics, science, languages, and ICT. So entrepreneur skills and lifelong learning is also emphasized. Study skills and values education are also included. So this sets out the foundation policy for learning and assessment in schools to bring in line with the 21st century demands on needs. So with this, the phenomena of the globalization, the digitalization in the 21st century have brought about new educational challenges. So it is this SPN'21, hopefully it will equip the students to face new challenges in the future. So instead of just focusing on the cognitive and skills development, other aspects of holistic education, such as the inculcation of the spiritual, moral, social, the cultural attitudes and the values, as well as the physical development, are also emphasized within the SPN'21. So the SPN'21 basically, it aims to be the Ministry of Education's platform for achieving Wawasan Brunei 2035, Yeah, it hopes to realize the Ministry of Education's vision and mission. It add value and raise the quality of education in line with the current or contemporary needs and the anticipated needs in the future years. And also it fulfill the needs and challenges of the social and economic development of the 21st century. And then second last point to it, it also aims to develop 21st century skills among students. Yeah, like I mentioned before, and also it uphold and develop desired values and attitudes among students in line with the MIB concept of the national philosophy. Along the way in the SPN'21, it also addresses concerns, and there were three, yeah, the need to sustain and strengthen performance in Bahasa Melayu, the low English language proficiency, poor performances in maths and science, and also lastly, it is also to increase the percentage of students' enrollment to higher education. So this is the figure of the SPN'21. So here, if you look at the, we start from below, yeah. So we have the preschool, which we start at 5 years old, then primary school, and then the entry test to Arabic schools at year 4. So if your children wish to join the Arabic school actually is under Ministry of Religious Affairs, not under Ministry of Education. So they will go there, they have the entry test, which starts at year 4. So this is the primary education that is for kids aged 6 to 11. Then primary, we have the general, after they end their primary school assessment, they move on to the secondary education. So by that time, they should be at the age of 12 to 16 years. So first, if your children manage to pass the Arabic assessment test, then they will move up to the Arabic secondary education. Yeah. And then after that, they will go into SPU and SPPU, and then slowly go to the education, tertiary education. But if they go to the normal education under the Ministry of Education, they will proceed to general education program. And then they have the 2 years common curriculum. This is usually done in 4 to 5 years. However, another group of students will have to go to the applied secondary education program and also have the 2 years common curriculum like the later. And then some of the students will need to go to the specialized education program and also the special education needs. This is for the special needs children, yeah. So for the after they go to the secondary education, they will go for O level or any other alternative, yeah. And then after that, they will pursue their education to either nursing education, pre-university, or vocational and technical education, or even specialized education. So from nursing education, they will get nursing diploma. For pre-university, they will get the A level. For the vocational and technical education, they will get the TVEC, yeah. And then as for the specialized education, they will just get the diploma. So from that on, then only they will move up to the tertiary education. So that would be the higher education lah. Yeah. So there are 5 higher education institutions in Brunei Darussalam, but the first 4 will be under, the first 4 is under Ministry of Education, and the 5th one is actually under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. So first would be the UBD, University Brunei Darussalam. Yeah, this is the picture. This is how they look at, just a portion of the campus. Yeah, it's actually a huge campus there. Then we have the University Technology Brunei. This one is the picture. UTB is actually situated very close to UBD, so it should be like around that area, like at the back. Yeah. And then we have UNISSA. This is where I am. This is the admin building actually. And then we have the Polytechnic Brunei in PB. This is located somewhere in Bandar Sri Begawan. And we have the Kupu SP. Again, it's also located in Bandar Sri Begawan. College University Perguruan Ugama Sri Begawan. We also have the, oh, sorry, this is actually the government school, government higher education institution under the government sector. The next slide, this one would be under the private sectors. So under the private sectors, we have the Institutes of Higher Learning, and there is 5. So we have the Cosmopolitan College of Commerce and Technology, this one. Yeah, and also the Kemuda Institute, Sendirian Berhad, this would be it. And College International Graduate School, sorry, not school, Graduate Studies, IGS, yeah. And Laksamana College of Business, LCB, Micronet International College, MIC. They're all located, spread out in Brunei. Yeah, right. So next we move on to the fundamental studies in higher education in Brunei. So in Brunei Darussalam, these are the main fundamental studies that students are required to take when they reach the higher education institution. So for example, in UBD, they need to take MIB, Melayu Islam Beraja, and also they need to take the curriculum and also internship. As for UTB, they also need to take MIB, but the additional would be the technical communication, and also the same thing as the previous one, curriculum and internship. In my uni, UNISSA, students are required to take Al-Quran, Melayu Islam Beraja, curriculum, internship, IT, Arabic and English, and entrepreneurship. So this would be the complete package of compulsory required courses to be taken for UNISSA students. For internship, that's where I am in charge in. So students are required to take 12 weeks of internships. For curriculum, they need to choose various curriculum activities. So we have silat, we also have cooking, we also have sewing, and many other activities to join in. And they are very interesting. Many students are actually fighting for their slots to join in. We also have entrepreneurship. So in this entrepreneurship, it's quite interesting. Students are required to come up with their own products to sell. Yeah, and this is to also inculcate the initiative, their creativity in their self, and also to encourage them to communicate to people. Yeah, so that they are not introverts, so that they are brave enough to show their potential to people. We also make our students in UNISSA compulsory to take Arabic and English, so that we can equip them, so they're versatile. So wherever they go, they could actually understand Arabic and English. Yeah. As for our Al-Quran, we also make it compulsory for them to learn to take the Al-Quran courses. So they need to read it for once in a week kind of classes, and they need to recite it in some programs. They need to memorize it. Yeah. Okay, that would be Al-Quran, MIB, co-curriculum, internship, IT, Arabic and English, and entrepreneurship. So for PB, there is MIB as the required courses, and curriculum and internship. It's similar to UBD. And for College University Perguruan Ugama Seri Begawan, KUPFB, it's similar to UNISSA as well. So we have the Al-Quran, MIB, curriculum, internship, information technology, Arabic, and English. Yeah, so that would be the fundamental studies in higher education in Brunei. All right, so as for conclusion, the Brunei education from 1972 to 2008, yeah, for the SPN'21 had undergone a lot of changes. Yeah, so they had undergone an evolution based on the advances that had been achieved by the education system, despite the ongoing challenges faced. So what is clear in the SPN'21, it continues to emphasize the studies of MIB as the core subject that is taught until higher education, with the objective to uplift the national philosophy and also the aspiration of Negara Zikir. So in every level of our education system in Brunei, we have to put in MIB as part of the course curriculum. Yeah, but also MIB is also taught in in kids from small, from elderly to their parents, to the kids, the values, the important values of MIB, Melayu Islam Baraja. So we've been raised from small until we're old, the concept of MIB. So similarly, the study of Quran and the mastery of language are emphasized in addition to the development of students' personalities. So this is through the co-curriculum, the internship, training, and the entrepreneurship as a preparation for them to face their career after graduation, and also to face the future challenges that we have right now. So we need to inculcate our students with digital literacy. Yeah, they need to know how to use digital. They need to know how to use IT, computer, iPad, and so on. And then we need to also to encourage them how to do entrepreneurial skills, and also if they do their internship well, then inshallah they will have a better job prospects in the future. Yeah, that is all from me. I thank you again for your attention for my presentation. With that, I end with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Radia, for such an eye-opening sharing into the the educational system in Brunei. Yeah, I do agree that in being in Nusantara, it is like our identity is as Melayu Islam, right? So meaning that Islam and Melayu go hand in hand. Together we move towards the future by wearing this identity as Melayu Islam. It is part of the image of being Nusantara here, without actually excluding other cultures and other belief systems. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Radia, for the delightful and thoughtful speech. Okay, honorable guests, we are delighted to invite our second keynote speaker, Professor Datuk Dr. Nur Inayah binti Yaakob, the President and Vice Chancellor of Infrastructure University Kuala Lumpur, to share with us the direction and development of fundamental studies in higher education system. Let me just share with you some background information of our second speaker. Professor Datuk Dr. Nur Inayah obtained her Bachelor in Law from International Islamic University in 1993 and later obtained a second degree in Sharia Law in 1994. She received her Masters in Commercial Laws from the University of Bristol, England, one of the top 5 faculties of law in the world, in 1997. She further obtained her PhD in law from the Law Faculty, the University of Manchester, England, in 2005, which she successfully completed in less than 3 years. As a practicing lawyer, academician and advisor to numerous boards, Professor Datuk Dr. Nur Inayah brings with her extensive experience and knowledge in the higher education industry. She was the Chief Executive Officer and Rector for a private college of Baitul Mal, Professional College of Islamic Council. Professor Datuk Dr. Nur Inayah also possesses numerous professional qualifications. She received 5th QS Apple Asia Pacific Professional Leaders in Education Expert Certificate in 2009. In the same year, she obtained Advanced Certificate in Technology Transfer and Project Management from University of Oxford. Later, in 2012, she received the United Nations Professional Certificate for Selected Higher Learning Corporate Planning Leaders for University Research and Teaching Components. Recently, in 2019, she received the Advanced Certificate for Leaders in Education, in Innovation and Strategy for the Future of Higher Education, School of Executive Education, Cambridge Judge Business School, University of Cambridge. Without further ado, please welcome Professor Datuk Dr. Nur Inayah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wa mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Yang saya muliakan Profesor Dr. Fazli bin Adam, Acting Vice Chancellor Universitas Sultan Zainal Abidin, UNISZA, Profesor Madya, Tok Puan Dr. Nizaita Omar, Director Center for Fundamental Studies, Universitas Sultan Zainal Abidin, UNISZA, dan seluruh warga UNISZA dan pendengar-pendengar sekalian. InsyaAllah today I'll be addressing on issues on what is to be expected from our graduates, especially when they graduated from our university in terms of fundamental studies. So allow me to discuss along the issues that I think worth considering before we decide on the proper syllabus of fundamental studies for our dear students. So ladies and gentlemen, let me share the screen please. Okay, this is something to do with which I think on holistic fundamental education. Because bearing in mind that the universities in Malaysia, of course, talking from the perspective of higher learning education, we have public universities as well as more than 400 private institutional for higher learning education. So I think what I'm suggesting today is not something exhaustive, but rather on exposing issues, exposing what students must know around them, taking into consideration the current situation, a kind of life that we are currently living, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic era, and also fintech world of technology. And at the same time, we must not neglect the ethical values and also the historical part of our beloved country and their role in generating their own income in future, not only depending on the subsidies offered by the government, but we have to train them to be independent and to sustain by having well equipped with the entrepreneurial skills when they receive our own education. So my question is that the first issues that we should address is what sort of desired quality of our graduates that we expect them to well equipped with when they graduate from our university. So I think this is one of the most important question that we should ask ourselves as the trainers and facilitators, as well as lecturers, researchers, principal researchers, about the quality that we expect students to have for our graduates. So in terms of preparing the more holistic fundamental studies, I think we should ask first what is the quality of student that we need to produce. So in my humble personal view is that there are few generic skills or rather characteristic and attributes that the students should have before we talk about what sort of fundamental knowledge that we should expose to them. Number one is, of course, we must produce the quality of graduates where they possess the entrepreneurial and innovation skills. So this is to me very important in the sense that without this skill of entrepreneurial and innovation, life will be difficult because in the future we are going to live in the so-called borderless countries and where everything is under the control of technology, where English is the paramount, and we must ensure that they do not neglect the quality and ethics and values because of course we want them once they're employed They must not commit any bribe and corruption. At the same time, they must be independent in coming out with a sort of a driver to be innovative in their working surroundings. So number one is the competent graduates with entrepreneurial and innovation skills. So with this in mind, of course, we have to tailor our fundamental education in order to produce this sort of students. Number two to me is they must not only competent, but they must be innovative, and these two attributes is very important, and the design curriculum for fundamental knowledge must tailor to the competent innovations. And I think the third one is for them to have the ability to drive a strategic relations and smart impactful partnership. So when they enroll into our university in the very first semester, we must ensure that they know what exactly they have to do after completing or graduating from our fundamental knowledge and syllabus. Because once they know that the attributes of being fundamental input as a studies, as education, of course, they have to think and able to drive strategic relations when they go to the society, when they are not within a campus, so that we have to coach them through the fundamental knowledge, what is exactly meant by strategic relations. And of course, my suggestion is to really measure on the impactful partnership. Impactful partnership, be it with industry and also with communities, they actually have come up with why the relationship that they're working out for is worth to be committed and materialized. Because the end of the day is they have to serve the society. Then ability to adopt and adapt to changing circumstances. This is very important. So to me, in fundamental kind of education, we should also expose to them how to react, how to live, how to give ideas, how to start communicating when you are actually live in a changing circumstances. Because we do not want them to be in the stereotype attributes. We do not want them to have so-called limitations and any bad skill. So I think we should have to consider how, by producing a good fundamental knowledge, they, in the end of the day, able to adopt and adapt to changing circumstances. And of course, is also on effective communication. So I think one of the syllabus of the fundamental pengajian teras ini must have a sort of communication skills. Be a public speaking might not be sufficient, because effective communication is how you react to the crowd, how you portray yourself as a graduate with knowledge and wisdom, for example, in conveying your ideas, as well as in rebutting people's ideas, because we do not want our graduates, after completing the fundamental kind of course and program, do not have the skill or public relations skills, in other words, in communicating with the rest of humankind globally. What more, we are in Malaysia is multiracial population. So we, of course, the language should not be the but when we produce the good graduates. And finally, of course, to able to apply knowledge to solve problems. This means that we should differentiate. We should able to differentiate to our students what's the meaning of knowledge, when someone possesses knowledge, when someone another part is how you wisely utilize your knowledge in order to solve problems. That is called al-hakim. So in Quran we see numerous of ayah talking about al-hakim wal-alim, that normally attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the teaching and coaching our students, we must ensure that at very least they are able to apply the knowledge that they are being exposed to wisely, so that they can solve problems at any point of time. So these are, among others, the outcome of quality of graduates that we have to produce from our university. Why I start with this outcome? Because from this outcome only, we managed to design our curriculum for the fundamental kind of program. So another thing is that besides exposing to students what are the issues that they need to know, to me, another fundamental question is that, are we really conscious of what we as the educator, are we really conscious of what is happening around? Well, do you ever think of how someone benefit others in a large scale? So we must at least throw to the students how to be good to the rest of humankind, how to contribute to the rest of humankind, how are you going to innovative in order that people at a large scale can benefit all the innovation that you're going to introduce. So to me, fundamental kind of program is very important for them to realize the benefit of completing the fundamental knowledge, so that they can easily delivering their tasks once they graduate or before graduates and forever in their life. Then what matters, for example, we must put in the syllabus itself something like to measure the performance on every day. For example, from time to drive home, from home to the office, to schools, taking a bus, for example, then when time to park the car, and then time to go to cafe, to canteen, and finally leading back to the accommodation. So what's the impact of their existence in a campus? What more now at home, online kind of learning. So maximum hours of delivering duties as students matters. So to me, when we guide students through the fundamental studies, we have to ensure that they really know, they really appreciate their performance daily by daily case. Day by day case. So I think this is important, so that they know once they come to the class meeting lecturers, even through the online, they have to really see from the 5 o'clock in the morning before performing Salat Subuh, what did they do? Then what's next? Until they go back to the end of the day, completing the whole syllabus of the fundamental program, fundamental studies program. So to me, what matters is for them to measure their quality of own self first. We must ensure that they're really conscious on this. Yeah. Then, if I may share, these are taken from Professor Ansari article from Judge Business School in 2019, when I enrolled into the executive learning at Cambridge School of Business, where Professor Ansari said that now the transformation between the two watches, we have Rolex and then the digital kind of watch. So even though it's not branded, but the new device actually give a great impact to the society. Why? Because the innovator, the creator of this IT knows very well how to control the society, how to get impactful, how to be impactful to the society. So we have to bring this case to the student to show that what is exactly meant by when you want to do good to humankind. So these are examples by people in Europe and all over the world, where they give something innovation, where this is innovation really impact the society. So in the pengajian teras or fundamental, I think the awareness to do good to society is also paramount. Fastabiqul khairat, but to what extent that khairat is to be achieved? To what extent the importance of fastabiqul khairat? So I think to what extent is they have to study, they have to read, they have to understand how people around them doing goods to other mankind, regardless of religion, races, and so on. What we want matters are the impact of doing the innovation. Okay. And this is another example of heavy preach by a young man in India, where he saw how the poor in India about the food cannot find the food. So he innovates and designs a happy fridge to the people in India. So the key to bridge food to wastage and hunger. Yeah. So this is a problem in India where the young Indian man has already resolved it because to avoid wastage and to avoid hunger. So how this happened? Because he has something inside his heart, and soul, how to do good things about on people, and not only to do good things, but also to be impactful to the society of what we want society to benefit from our innovation. So again, in the syllabus of fundamental studies, we must highlight the overall key role as Khalifa in a very, practical life, like this, like I watched before, and other innovation like a mobile phone, where we can educate people with knowledge, borderless kind of knowledge. So these are kind of innovation that our students must be well equipped with. The big why, for example, on the innovative patient in the labor room, and take home baby rate, and also shorter emergency waiting time at hospital by way of digital watch. These are something that students must be exposed to when we take them into our class of fundamental studies. Then, of course, I think on the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 important goals to transform our world must be really comprehended by our students. So our students must know what is meant by no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, the quality education, and the gender equality, so on and so forth. For example, life on the land, life below water. This is something that we have to connect within the first fundamental program syllabus, because sustainable development is actually well accepted and has to be transformed from country to country. So we cannot left our students behind this 17 goals to transform the world. Yeah, and of course, the very recent this year news on Reverend Agustin on 2020. Last year, 2020 is a lost year for many B40 students as educators. This is something that we should always remind our students. Not all students are, in the similar position, being able to learn, being able to go to university, being able to have the laptop, being able to have the digital device to learn in this pandemic COVID-19 era. So there are more people out there. For many B40 can't afford those equipments and devices. So it's a total loss year to the student. So these kind of challenges must be also taught in the fundamental studies to the student, not only in case of B40, but also around the world, people with ill health, for example, and so on and so forth, just to educate our students when they want to draft or develop a policy, they have to always look at a 360 degree. Then, of course, there is a new literatures on the B40 English proficiency, just to set and change mind of our student that English proficiency is very important nowadays, because without English proficiency, we cannot address the issues on 4IR, and the fundamental knowledge of fundamental studies is very, very important to include all the communication by way of English and also other languages. But to me, English is actually dominant language for the global communication. So our student must be able to have and rated with English proficiency through the interesting exercises expect to be delivered and assessed in the fundamental studies syllabus. So based on this article, the 40 categories again have a low English proficiency, and these students are most at risk, are not future-proof, and lack of English proficiency may reduce the employability rate of these students. So English proficiency is a must, something to do with illustration or other interesting simulation as part and parcel of illustration to be assessed in the fundamental knowledge of fundamental studies syllabus at the university. So this is for IR known as Industrial 4.0 and Smart Factory. Why I say English proficiency is very important because number one, it accentuates the advances and technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented virtual reality, big data, big analysis, Internet of Things, and of course, great demands of addressing English literacy and skills is very important. So we cannot ignore these facts by way of communication. I really hope that UNISZA can be one of the example for the rest of the world on how pengajian teras ataupun fundamental studies also include communication skill by way of English proficiency. Then this is another thing that we need our students to know when we draft the attributes of the fundamental study syllabus. Of course, this is a statistic by Malaysia Demographic Info by Prime Minister's Department of Statistics Malaysia, where in 65 years old will be increased up to 2.34 million. Percentage is 7.0. In Japan, it's already 12%. In Korea, so meaning to say akan ramai populasi warga emas. So are we really want student to ignore the fact? Yeah, because this is a fact based on this statistic. So by having this kind of ecosystem that we are going to live in 2030, for example, and they are they are very young, and by the year 2030 they reach a particular set of mind, working surrounding where many elders around them. So what sort of attributes that they should be well equipped with starting from today under the umbrella of fundamental studies that we are going to introduce to the student. And for me, one of the important is English proficiency, communication, and also Fasabiqul Khairat, as well as the elders that are going to be progressing from time to time. This is another statistic by the Malaysian Prime Minister Department about the areas where more orang-orang warga emas akan lebih bertambah from time to time. So with that as a background, muqaddimah on the current issues that the students should be well exposed. To me, what we want is to achieve the ummah with taqwa environment. Wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. So this is to say that we must understand the world that we are going to share. What sort of ummah that we're going to have for the future environment. So I think by virtue of, something that we have to bear in mind is mapping the holistic ecosystem with a kind of tabarru'at. We must educate students to be in the sense that they should always give away to people like sadaqah or zakat, something like compulsory for them to pay is one of the rukun, and also if anything like hibah, so that this kind of tabarruat deeds, to me, something that they cannot expect the consideration when they give something to people, are called as and termed as tabarruat. So to me, when we have that in their mind and soul and heart, always giving to the poor, always give to the others without questioning, without consideration, then we are able to develop an ummah with taqwa environment. So then economic empowerment by way of this tabarruat will be strengthened. And of course, the current governance, they should know that Malaysia is what? The governance of Sharia law is governed by constitution. So there be another muamalat principle under the Islamic finance, zakaful, and so on and so forth, because we are regulated by constitution and proactive ijtihad. So people, students from religious background must understand how to apply the maqasid sharia when they want to ijtihad and give rulings on certain hukum, when they understood that they are able. I think UNISZA students are one of the good students in applying the Islamic and Sharia principles in their employment. So these are part and parcel of Islamic economics overview when we design our curriculum for fundamental knowledge or studies. Students must be able to design and sustain, execute in this market development with some capabilities and competencies. As I said, efficiency, attentiveness, disclosure, transparency, imprudent management, so that corruption is never being committed. And at the same time, they must know the reputation and will. And of course, promoting holistic taqwa and producing, we are educators should bear in mind that we are now producing scholars by virtue of having a very good, solid of fundamental studies syllabus. And of course, when they work, they are to be set up as and referred to by the trusted entity. So I skip this one. So another point is that what traits in leadership? Of course, leadership must also be taught to the fundamental studies course, because to me, it is important to make their role important, especially in the post-pandemic recovery. And why this leadership is important? Because it is to become the key to post-pandemic leadership. So to me, I think we go back to the sabda Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. So you are actually all leaders to yourself. It makes everyone a leader at least for himself. So every one of you are leaders, and you'll be able to ask to be responsible upon your leadership. So to me, we have to also educate them that they are actually a Khalifa in what sense. So back to the Rasulullah SAW, kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. Then to me, wa innaka la'ala khuluqin azim, we must show that the best example are from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The duty of a believer towards Allah's creation in fulfilling their rights can only be fulfilled when huququllah, the duty of the believer in fulfilling Allah's rights, leads him towards khuluqun azim, which means an exalted standard of character. So wa innaka la'ala khuluqin azim must be well exposed in the fundamental knowledge syllabus, so that there is no one for us as believers other than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best example. So students must be exposed to the sirah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam too. And وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَامَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. So when we talk about leadership to students through the fundamental studies, we actually referring to Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 2, and help one another in goodness and piety, and do not help one another in sin and aggression, and be careful of your duty to Allah. Surely Allah is a severe in punishment. So this is to show that in the next society or in the current society, society 5, students have to bear in mind these are the characteristics set by Rasulullah SAW, so that the environment of taqwa that we are going to achieve is something that achievable if the essence of goodness, piety will be well delivered to the students through the fundamental studies syllabus. And again, on the wisdom and knowledge here, students must be able to understand the two different things of knowledge and wisdom. As I said earlier, knowledge is information of which someone is aware. Knowledge is also used to mean the confident understanding of a subject, potentially with the ability to use it for a specific purpose. And wisdom is the ability to make correct judgments and decisions. It is an intangible. It's actually very hard to measure quality gained through our experiences in life. So I refer to the Surah Al-Hakim here, Surah Luqman, and word Al-Hakim in the verse 2 of Surah Luqman and Yasin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, Al-Kitabul Hakim and Quran wa Al-Hakim min Rasulullah, min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the attribute of Al-Quran, which is full of wisdom and truth, as well as being perfect and flawless in terms of excluded from having any language defect, vagueness, and etc. So in verse 9 and 37, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ and إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ means his attributes of all wise in creating and governing all his creations. So this means that by virtue of these verses in our fundamental studies syllabus, we must inculcate, nurture our students to become like what we understood the meaning of knowledge and wisdom. And also, this is another hadith that we must distribute and disseminate to our students from the syllabus of fundamental studies. Is taraktu fikum amrain lan tadillu ma tamassaktum bihima kitabullah wa sunnat nabiyyih. I've left two matters with you. As long as you hold to them, you will not go the wrong way. They are the book of Allah and the sunnah of his prophet. So if our students are well educated and equipped with this verse, this hadith, then I think we are okay because Allah is with us. Then, of course, in this multi-dimensional kind of living in our country, our students must be well exposed to the multicultural of populations in our country, being a Malaysian. And what more, they have to face the borderless country where there is no citizenship or citizenshipless. They must have a very good and strong proficiency in languages, and they must have a strong communication ability. These are to me very important to be emphasized in our fundamental study syllabus. Again, why? Because we want to have taqwa in them. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. We have to believe, fear Allah, and be with those who are true. So this is to avoid our students later in the employment time, working time life forever. For example, after graduating, we must ensure them to have something that taqwa, because this can avoid them from being caught by corruption, deceiving, breach of trust, and etc. And of course, in fundamental studies, we have to heal them or really educate them. Wala tamshi fil ardi maruha, dan janganlah kamu berjalan di muka bumi dengan sombong. So students from universities must be really good, and not as a student, but also good students with knowledge and wisdom. And they must be humble and know how to communicate, how to convey the ideas, how to somehow dispute with others, because in the end of the day, we want them to able to use their knowledge to solve problems for the benefit of mankind. So another issues that I think worth considering to be part and parcel of our syllabus here is on the mental capacity and the normal in the new normal, because when we live in the post-pandemic era with unexpected new virus come in, I think they should be able to understand how to avoid being illness in mental. So the mental capacity is very important, because we have somehow shown them that there are institutional marriages. There are also a cohort of people with spiritual advisors, for example. And in case of company and associations, industry out there, of course, the fiduciary relationship between the people working, doctor and patient relationship, lawyers and client, elders and granddaughter, grandson, for example, and political leaders and followers. So these are institutions where mental capacity become really important. So they must know that their capacity in thinking, in producing something quality must be preserved. And how to preserve is to look and study and to be somehow put in our syllabus to really care about what is happening around. Okay, so this is berlumba-lumba, fastabiqul khairat, untuk melakukan kebaikan. They must always be shown this light, so that this is to show that don't waste time. Don't look at something that's not important. Don't waste time means your phone, your IG, your social media must be decreased, because you want to do something impactful to the society. Then now think of some disruptive with values. Before this, we treat VIPs with red carpet, but now we treat people with dementia with a red carpet. This is something to educate our students to think along the blue ocean strategy, not a red ocean strategy. Our student must not only think of what people do, they have to follow, but our student must be trained through the fundamental knowledge on how to be creative, so that we are not in the blue ocean. We must let them to think of it is worse of being in the red ocean. We must be in the blue ocean, because something disruptive with values is really much encouraged for students with a good IQ, with a good exposures of how to do goods to people. And of course, talking about maqasid syariah, they must also know about this 5 maqasid syariah, because this 5 maqasid syariah is another part of principles that they must understand. Why they have to understand? Because they have to protect their life, they have to protect their religion, they have to protect their property and wealth, they have to protect dignity and descendant, and of course they have to protect the intellectual. So I think Islam in holistic manner is one of the first syllabus that to be taught in the fundamental knowledge studies. This is socio-economic and consumerism. They must know what is meant by government, what is NGO, what is, for example, the tabaru'at, and why is that so important for education. And we have something that how to think, how to differentiate between secular law and Islamic law, so that our students are able through this fundamental knowledge to grab things with a quality kind of thinking. Yeah. I skip this on the evolution. Then of course, talking about this, they must really understand by virtue of fundamental knowledge on how to appreciate their life and how to appreciate others and how to do good to others. And the good thing to others must be so impactful. I think with that, I end my presentation because I exposed to the audience today on the importance of ingredients or syllabus or inputs that to be encompassed in our fundamental knowledge and fundamental study syllabus. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Datuk Dr. Inayah, for the interesting and enlightening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with the parallel sessions presentation after this at 11 a.m., both in room C and D. Good luck to all presenters. Thank you for your presence for today's session. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.